Hello, Dragonfly Swarm. It is I, Dragonfly. I pulled for Yelan just like everyone and their mother did because she's pretty and she's strong. But as much as I wanted to make a guide for Yelan, I felt so much more interested in talking about this unlikely duo that has blown my mind these past few days as I've tested Yelan. Yelan and Xingqiu, I want to discuss why I consider them a god duo, and this is a series that I sometimes do in which I cover the amazing synergy between two specific characters in Genshin and why I feel they're so strong together. The irony here is that I literally was pulling for Yelan to use as a Xingqiu in a second team, and she somehow ended up in Xingqiu's team. From mending the flaws in each other's kits to creating hyper-aggressive team comps, these two, in my opinion, could potentially become a new wave of reaction teams in the meta of Genshin Impact. And even if you don't give a shit about the meta, they're really fun to pair together, I'm not gonna lie. If this video helps you or you just like watching it, please like and subscribe. It'll boost your chances of getting Yelan. That's a lie, but still subscribe. The first thing I want to dive into with their synergy is the similarity of their bursts. Xingqiu's burst is unique and extremely valuable for a number of reasons, one of which being that it specifically targets the enemy your active character is currently attacking, making it extremely convenient for applying Hydro and the only ability in the entire game to do so in such a practical way. Well, until Yelan came out. Yelan's burst acts identically to Xingqiu's in that regard, yet depending on your investment does significantly more damage than Xingqiu's burst, and if you factor in C2 Xingqiu, which I'm sure a large handful of the player base has obtained, Yanfei's burst will benefit... Who is Yanfei? Yelan's burst will benefit from 15% Hydro Shred. This means, for example, if Yelan's burst hits for an average of 6,000 damage for 10 hits, she's dealing 6,000 times 3 instances times 10 hits, which is 180,000 burst damage in total, but with Xingqiu's Shred, that damage is theoretically increased to 207,000 total burst damage. I say theoretically because damage resistance and shred mechanics are a bit more complicated than that, but that's the general idea. It's also worth mentioning that with both bursts actively shredding the enemy your active character is targeting, that's adding up to a very large amount of focused single target damage, making it noticeably easier than usual to clear hordes of enemies. In regards to single target damage, take for example this Hu Tao team I brought up against Raiden. If we really simplify the damage numbers that are coming out of this, it basically reads as follows. Yelan's burst is critting for 6,600 damage per hit, while Xingqiu's is critting for an average of 4,100 per hit. Hu Tao's charged attacks are hitting for, let's round the average to 85,000 per hit. This means that if we were to hit Raiden 10 times with these attacks simultaneously and they always crit, Hu Tao would total to 850,000 damage with her charged attacks, but Xingqiu and Yelan would also be dealing 321,000 damage over the course of those 10 attacks. That means those two account for roughly 27% of the team's total damage output, and that's not even counting the fact that they also provide insanely fast Hydro application for Hu Tao, as well as Yelan's massive ramping damage buff for Hu Tao. And keep in mind, that calculation is assuming Xingqiu isn't at C6, all of Hu Tao's attacks crit, and all of Yelan and Xingqiu's attacks crit, so it'll be more of a give or take 27% rather than definitively 27%, but it's still a considerable portion of the team's damage considering the sheer amount of damage Hu Tao is dishing out. But at the end of the day, you could just as easily get lower but similar results with either Yelan or Xingqiu rather than both at the same time, so why use both? Well, because damage is far from the only thing these two help each other out with in-game, as another big issue in Genshin is the ability to apply Hydro fast enough to support reaction teams. Once again, Xingqiu is by far the best character in the game when it comes to applying Hydro at a fast rate because it allows the majority of Pyro DPS characters to trigger Vaporize on every attack they possibly can. Yelan, however, while similar to Xingqiu, holds noticeably lower Hydro application capabilities at C0, and to keep this video relatively simple, Yelan's Hydro application basically just isn't fast enough to guarantee that your DPS characters can trigger the right reactions 100% of the time. And the bad thing about this is that in some cases, triggering the wrong reaction can make it impossible for the Hydro application to return to the enemy, meaning your DPS character will have no chance of reacting with Hydro for their entire rotation. Yelan suffers from this issue just like many other Hydro units, but unlike other Hydro units, Yelan is almost exclusively an off-field burst DPS, much like Xingqiu, and as such, you can pair both Xingqiu and Yelan with a DPS such as Yoimiya or Hu Tao and still maintain a stable rotation. Using Xingqiu alongside Yelan will not only grant their combined burst damage output a massive increase, as we discussed earlier, but their Hydro application together will make it pretty much impossible to screw up your main DPS's reactions. Not to mention, Yelan flat out grants your active character her massive ramping damage buff while her burst is active. So whilst applying Hydro insanely fast onto enemies for your carry to vaporize attacks, they're also enjoying Yelan's damage ramp up, as well as increased survivability and durability from Xingqiu. Plus, with Hydro Resonance, as useless as it may seem, your Xingqiu's tiny healing is slightly increased, which grants even more survivability. And that's the next point I wanted to discuss with these two after Hydro application: survivability. Oh my god. Bro! You see, Yelan on her own in teams without shielders makes it extremely difficult to survive for very long if you're not instantly killing the enemy in front of you. I would know. I don't know if it's because I suck or what, but... The reason Xingqiu doesn't have this problem is because of the passive his rain swords grant the active character, in which they enjoy increased interruption resistance and even heal every time rain swords disappear. And while it's not godlike team survivability, it's usually enough to get away with building your team much more offensively than you otherwise could. And that is exactly why I'd consider Yelan one of the best picks to round out this offensive team comp, because Xingqiu grants the team survivability, and in exchange, Yelan is able to grant even faster hydro application, massive direct damage buffs to your carry, and a considerable damage output of her own. Xingqiu essentially allows her to do her job to its fullest extent. And the cool part is, the damage these two provide for pyro carry units also outperforms the damage that double Geo can provide, for example, specifically because of Yelan's considerable ramping damage buff. I say this because my main concern with running 2 Hydro units over double Geo or double Pyro is that Hydro Resonance does next to nothing for the team when it's Yelan and Xingqiu applying the resonance, but it really doesn't matter because the only other resonance passives I wanted were those that granted damage buffs, but those damage buffs are outweighed by Yelan's ramping buff and the constant hydro application, so it didn't matter. That's how good she is. With Xingqiu's ability to provide stable hydro application and survivability so that Yelan can effectively do her job, double hydro doesn't even need a resonance passive to support its team with top tier damage potential regardless of who that team is comprised of. Whether it be Hu Tao as a main DPS with Kazuha for damage buffing, Raiden as a main DPS with Bennett as a hyper carry support, Beto and Kazuha, Yoimiya and Bennett, just about any electro charged or vaporized team comp, even including variations of national team, can benefit massively from running Xingqiu and Yelan's double hydro together. The only team style that I don't think would get full value from this duo is a freeze team, mostly because freeze teams usually rely heavily on cryo resonance and an animal crowd controller and resistance shredder. So there's really not much room to place 2 hydro units in a freeze team, but then again, no one's stopping you if you do want to do it. Now that we've discussed all the intricate details regarding this duo, how they work and what they work with, my overall thoughts are as follows. I think Yelan and Xingqiu, although both amazing units on their own and in their own ways, work extremely well together as a means of creating hyper-aggressive team comps in which your main focus is dealing, well, a ton of damage. Xingqiu complements Yelan by granting the team much needed survivability that Yelan herself cannot grant, and she complements Xingqiu by making great use of his Hydro Shred, providing a huge percent base damage increase to your main DPS, and also just dealing ridiculous amounts of off-field damage of her own. Plus, with both of them circulating Hydro particles between each other, you can focus less on energy recharge and more on crit ratios if you so choose. But anyways, that's about it from me in this video. I seriously was planning on making a fully fleshed out Yelan guide, but I figured everyone else has already made one and I haven't seen enough people talking about this duo, so it just felt right, you know? If you liked this video, you should check out some of my other videos in this series because there's a few god duos in Genshin. Among them is me and my bed. I'm going to bed. Thank you for watching.